Good morning and welcome. My name is Liane Moccia, and in this session, we will be talking about how to support your body naturally after an unsuccessful IVF cycle. So I'm just so happy that you're here. I wanted to just say hello, and I have a slide presentation that I will share with you today to get started. So let's just jump right in. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So as I mentioned, we're going to be talking today about how to naturally support your body after an unsuccessful IVF cycle. I want to tell you a little bit about me and why I chose this topic to present today. As I mentioned, my name is Liane Moccia. I'm a holistic fertility specialist and a registered herbalist. I specialize in fertility, pregnancy planning, sleep, and stress. I work with people from all over the country via Zoom and telehealth, but I actually live in Andover, Massachusetts. And it was my own fertility challenges that led me to where I am today and are why I chose to specialize in fertility as an herbalist. So I want to give you a little overview of what we're going to cover today in this session. We're going to talk about how to support your liver naturally. We'll learn how to work with herbs that support the liver after using multiple IVF medications. We're going to talk about how to nourish and support your nervous system so that you can prepare for whatever the next phase in your journey might be. We'll put together a plan in place so that you have what you need in the event of an unsuccessful cycle without feeling like you're planning for failure. And then lastly, I have some resources for you. I am going to give you a link where you can download all of the slides from today's presentation, as well as another handout with some recipes and some more resources on that. I wanted to start with why this topic. There are so many things that I could have talked about in areas that I work with clients that are trying to improve their fertility or working through an IVF cycle. I chose this topic because I find that when people come to work with me, often they've already had an unsuccessful IVF cycle, and I wish that we had started working together a little bit sooner, because having this protocol in place and having a plan ready to go can really make a difference in those weeks after your cycle. It can help with the healing process, but it can also help getting your body ready for whatever might be next. The second reason I wanted to talk about this topic is because I know how it feels to have an unsuccessful IVF cycle. I had 3 of them. Many years ago, when I was going through my fertility journey, I went through multiple rounds of IVF, many of them being canceled because I didn't produce enough eggs to even get to retrieval. But I still had all the medications that were in my cycle. I remember how that felt. A lot of abdominal pain, as well as the emotional side of an unsuccessful IVF cycle. I wish I knew then what I know now, which is that herbs can be incredibly gentle and supportive during this time period, and it's really shaped my career and the way I practice. I mentioned that I chose to specialize in fertility as an herbalist. It really empowered me to want to go back to school. I had had a career in corporate marketing before becoming an herbalist. I did go back to school, become a registered herbalist. I spent some time working doing an internship with a renowned naturopathic fertility doctor in Boston. And I opened my clinical practice just over 5 years ago in Andover, specializing in this area. So I know how it feels to go through this process, and I have seen in my own work with clients how much these herbs and natural strategies can really support the body during this time. So let's just jump right in. The first area we're going to talk about is liver support. So how can we work with herbs to support the liver after you've used multiple IVF medications? I think we should start with, why would the liver potentially need a little extra support during this time? So if you're not completely clear on what the liver does in the body, one way to think about it is that the liver is the body's processing plant and housekeeper. So it really metabolizes and processes things that come in, as well as cleaning things up. So it metabolizes all the medications that we take, it metabolizes our hormones and other environmental toxins and things that we're exposed to. It turns them then into compounds which can be excreted either through urine, sweat, or stool. And we eliminate those on a daily basis. So why might we want to give our liver a little extra support right now? Well, it's been working overtime, right? So there's an increased demand to process medications and hormones that more medications during an IVF cycle, elevated hormones during an IVF cycle. So it's just working a little bit harder right now. But I want to be very clear that while the liver may need a little support, the liver knows how to do this naturally. Detoxification is its job, and it doesn't necessarily need a push or input from us to do that. But what we can do is support some of the raw materials that the liver relies on to process and do this effectively and efficiently. And that's really what we're going to focus and talk about today. So how does detoxification work? Without getting too nerdy, liver detoxification can be broken down into 3 phases. Phase 1 and phase 2 happen within the liver, and then phase 3 is that elimination piece. So in phase 1, enzymes break down toxins and create these very highly reactive free radicals. So hormones, medications, anything that's in our system that needs to be processed or eliminated, filters through the liver. The liver creates these free radicals and starts to break them down in phase 1. At this point, those medications, hormones, toxins, anything that the liver has brought in and started to break down are actually in a more toxic state in that phase 1 part of detoxification. So it's really important that the liver then packages up in phase 2 so that we can safely eliminate them. So phase 2 is when these large molecules join with all of the free radicals and they produce water-soluble substances. Those water-soluble substances then can be excreted. So for example, when we're talking about elimination through the stool, the liver will take these large molecules, dump them into the bile. The bile then puts it into the large intestines and we poop it out. You have similar pathways through the kidneys where we urinate and through the skin through sweat. So what's needed for this to happen? I mentioned that our bodies are incredibly capable of natural detoxification, but it does need certain raw ingredients for this to happen. So if we go back to looking at phase 1 of liver detoxification, the enzymes are breaking down these toxins and creating these free radicals. The body needs a lot of B vitamins, including B12 and folate, B2, B3, B6, and it needs the antioxidant glutathione and more to help that all happen. Then we need to go from phase 1 to phase 2, which is a time that the liver relies a lot on antioxidants. And then once in phase 2, those large molecules join with the free radicals to produce the water-soluble substances. During this phase, we need a lot of amino acids, which are found in proteins. And then the last phase, what needs to happen there is we just need to make sure that we have regular ways to encourage elimination. So making sure we're not constipated, making sure we have normal sweat and we're hydrated and urinating regularly. Now, I don't want anyone to panic when you see all of the highlighted here, your body needs all of these vitamins and antioxidants and protein. Most likely, continuing with your prenatal multivitamin, having a pretty well-rounded diet is going to be enough to meet these requirements. But sometimes we need a little extra support, and that's where we're going to talk about ways to support this whole process. But I don't want you to think that you need to rush out and buy a bunch of supplements, protein powders, and really support your body through this. We can do this naturally and gently with just a few small strategies. So again, I think the takeaway here is that detoxification is a very nutrient-intense process. So if you were to have nutrient deficiencies, that could contribute to making this whole process less efficient, but we're going to make sure that we're eating well, taking our prenatal, and adding in a few herbs to ensure that we have all of the nutrients that we need to make this happen. So let's talk a little bit more about what those strategies could be to support detoxification. I already mentioned we need B vitamins, antioxidants, and amino acids. So where can you find those? Well, B vitamins, fruits, veggies, and herbs are particularly high in B vitamins, are important for that phase 1 detoxification. Antioxidants, again, you can find those in fruit, veggies, and herbs. And that helps support both phases of phase 1 and phase 2. And then lastly, amino acids and protein. So making sure you have a nice protein-rich diet during this stage is important. When we talk about elimination, I have some strategies that will go into more detail, but really we want to make sure we're getting lots of hydration, adequate fiber, and potentially some herbs if needed. I want to really stress here, this is an important thing for everybody that I want you to take away, is this is not the time to stress our liver any more than it needs to be. So one of the big mistakes that I see people making here is trying a really extreme or restrictive detox or cleanse. I hope that this makes a little more sense now that we've shown the detoxification pathway and how you need B vitamins, antioxidants, and proteins. If you were to engage in a really restrictive cleanse or diet that was restricting calories, restricting protein, you wouldn't have the raw ingredients that your liver needs to make all of this happen. So I often see these fad detoxes where they have a lot of herbs or supplements that help push detoxification, but they take away all the raw ingredients that our body needs to ensure that phase 1 and phase 2 both happen properly and effectively. So please don't and during this time is not the time to do any of these extreme or restrictive detoxes. We want to be adding in fruits and veggies and herbs and proteins, not taking things away. Also during this time, if it makes sense to you, alcohol is something that our liver has to process and clear. So limiting alcohol or eliminating it just during this time could be a very good thing. Same thing with sugar. And for some people, dairy. That's something that's individual depending on you, but some people, dairy can be a little bit inflammatory and could be avoided during this time. Okay, so now let's talk about some specifics with an herb that most people can find used very safely and effectively during this time to give their liver a little extra support. There are a lot of herbs that can support gentle liver detoxification. When I work with somebody in my clinic, I will look at their individual health history and what's going on with them specifically to help select the herbs that are appropriate. But one herb that I come back to over and over that works really well and is generally well tolerated and safe for most people is turmeric. You may have heard of turmeric already. It's something you can buy in the grocery store. It's a common spice and root herb. It got a lot of popularity when some Alzheimer's research came out showing that it can be protective of dementia and cognitive decline as we age. It's also been in the news a lot for some of the research in cancer therapies. But I love turmeric because it has a lot of antioxidants. It's a gentle liver supportive herb and can really help support phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification. One of my favorite ways to enjoy turmeric is in something called golden milk. I mentioned earlier in the resources section that there's a recipe download that you have access to. I have a recipe for my favorite golden milk. It's a mixture of a non-dairy milk. I like using coconut milk with some ground turmeric, very similar to what you buy in the spice area of your grocery store. And then some of these other warming and delicious herbs and spices like cinnamon, ginger, cardamom. It's a lovely warm beverage and it's great for this time of year. Interestingly, turmeric is another herb that I often will use when working with clients one-on-one because there's been some studies to support that it can help improve semen parameters. I think that's likely to the really high antioxidant levels within turmeric, But again, just mentioning that this is such a just such a versatile herb and really well tolerated by many people. So I am curious if any of you have tried golden milk before. You can leave comments in the chat. I'm able to answer any questions you might have. And I didn't mention that at the beginning of the presentation, so I'll mention that now. You can and put any questions that you might have in the chat, and I will do my best to answer them throughout the presentation, or definitely we'll have some time at the end for me to answer questions in the chat. But I'm curious if anyone has tried golden milk before and what you think of it. Okay, so we talked about supporting phase 1 and phase 2 of liver detoxification. Now phase 3, which is supporting elimination. This part is incredibly important. So if you're someone who tends towards constipation, this is an area you want to pay particular attention. And sometimes just the IVF medications and going through the cycle can have some people dealing with constipation that it wasn't a problem for them in the past. So the reason this is important is because once the liver has packaged up all of the toxins that we're meant to eliminate, and it goes from the bile into the large intestines and is in the stool, if we're not eliminating regularly, that stool sits in the large intestines. It's they're water-soluble molecules. They can get reabsorbed to a certain extent and then recirculated in the bloodstream, and then the liver has to package and process them. And that's just not ideal. We want to be eliminating regularly so that all of the toxins that we've dumped into the stool can go out of the body. So really managing constipation is important during this phase. And there's several things that I think most of us know, but sometimes we forget, and we want to jump to herbs or supplements or even medications to help us stay regular. But I would encourage you to start with some of the simple things first, like drinking plenty of water. That's something that your reproductive endocrinologist may have already recommended to you, especially during right after retrieval. It's important to stay hydrated. So again, continuing to stay hydrated is going to help with elimination. Fiber is also important. You want to start slowly here, but if you can work your way up to about 2 tablespoons of ground flax per day, that's a good amount of fiber that can help. But don't start out with 2 tablespoons right away, because it can actually be a little bit uncomfortable to start there. You want to go slowly. Another simple tip that my clients find very helpful, and often is all they need to help get them going again, is a little bit of lemon water first thing in the morning. So you do this with room temperature or even slightly warmed water and about juice of half a lemon. Start your day that way, and that can really help. Also, some gentle movement. We're going to talk a little bit more in the nervous system section about how rest is so important. So I'm not telling people to go out and start exercising right away, but just gentle movement throughout the day, some walking, some stretching. If you like yoga, this could be a good time to do some restorative yoga. But just trying to avoid being overly sedentary can help keep things moving. So those are some of the basic lifestyle things that we don't want to overlook. Now, if you're doing all of that and you still need a little extra support, again, there are a lot of herbs. If you were to Google herbs for constipation, you're going to get a very long list. Not all of them are safe or recommended during this phase. But one that I find works well for many people and is safe during this time is a very simple lemon, ginger, honey tea. So this is, again, a recipe in the recipe guide, which you can get at my website. The link is here. It's lianesherbalwellness.com/RNE, and you'll be brought straight to a page where you can download the slides as well as a recipe guide. But I love this, this tea because it relies on a good, healthy dose of fresh ginger. And ginger is a wonderfully supportive herb. It's warming. It's also high in antioxidants and can really help get things moving. Ginger is also used for things like cramping, some digestive issues. So I find that it has a nice place in this stage of recovery. and can be used for multiple things. I talk about ginger in a lot of my webinars and presentations on a multiple range of topics, everything from menstrual cramps to nausea, constipation, as well as it's a well-loved cold and flu first line remedy. So it's a good tea, I think, to have in your herbal toolkit, and you might find multiple uses for it. Okay, so we talked about some antioxidants and some gentle liver support with the golden milk tea, talked about supporting elimination. Now let's go back to talking about overall nutrition. We already saw how B vitamins, antioxidants, and proteins are essential for proper liver detoxification. So you want to make sure your diet is including all of these things. And like I said, continue taking your prenatal multivitamin. That is likely going to be a large portion of the support that you need. Also focusing on whole nutritious foods with a variety of fruits and vegetables, and making sure you have adequate protein. Again, avoid any restrictive cleanses or detoxes or diets during this time. We don't want to be taking things out, we want to be putting things in. Sometimes when I'm working with clients, we feel like this nutrition piece needs a little extra work and support, and there are some nutritious herbal infusions, things like nettle and oat straw, that we might pull in to help boost nutrition. But in general, the things we've talked about today with a multivitamin and a healthy diet and some of the teas we've already talked about is going to be enough for most people. Okay. So now that we've talked about supporting our liver to do what it already knows how to do, just giving it a little extra liver love or support, now I want to transition and talk a little more about nervous system support. So how can you nourish and support your nervous system to prepare for the next phase in your journey? And while this is really important because it helps us sort of get through the process a little bit better and feeling better, it's also important because it helps our body to deal with the stress response in a way that helps us, again, be ready for whatever's next. So hormone balance, stress management is important to help us kind of get back to baseline. So I want to encourage you during this time to start by asking, what does your body need? I know that it can be easy to jump to herbs or supplements and say, what can I take to feel better? What can I take to feel more calm and grounded and less stressed? And while herbs can be incredibly supportive in this process, and I work with them and use them myself all the time, I don't want us to forget some of the lifestyle things that we can do that are equally important. So here's a few ideas to get you started on how you can think about supporting your nervous system. Start paying attention to what helps you feel calm and grounded. What helps you feel like you're moving from that fight or flight mode into rest and recovery mode. And this is really important because it's not just about how you're feeling. Inside your hormonal response, when we are stressed, we have elevated levels of cortisol and other stress hormones that can have a cascade effect across all of our hormones. So the more we can rest and come back to our baseline, it allows our body to recover and all of our hormone levels to kind of come back down to baseline. So here's a few ideas to get you started. I start with sleep. Sleep's incredibly important, and this is an area that I work with clients on a lot. Sleep is something that allows our body to reset and restore overnight. And again, it's incredibly tied to hormone balance and overall health and fertility. So if you're struggling with sleep, I think that's a great area to start. I can certainly help more in that area in a one-on-one setting, but in general, making sure you're prioritizing a healthy sleep schedule, going to bed about the same time and waking around the same time are all really powerful techniques. I have also listed here breath work. Breath work can mean anything from meditation to simply being aware of your breath throughout the day and taking a 30-second break where you Inhale slowly and exhale even longer. That can help reset that fight or flight response pretty quickly. Journaling, if that's something that feels good to you, spending some time in nature and time with loved ones. Adult coloring, I saw an interesting study that showed that doing adult coloring actually activated the same areas of the brain that become activated during meditation. So if you're not super drawn to meditation, but you enjoy coloring, that could be a really good thing for you to incorporate in your life. Some people find tapping can be very helpful. And then I mentioned sleep again, because again, sleep is so foundational that if it's something you're struggling with, let's spend some time working on that, because it can set you up for success with everything else that we're going to be talking about with supporting your nervous system. Okay, but let's now talk about some of the herbs that can help support your nervous system during this time. So did you know that just the simple act of making a cup of tea and mindfully holding that steaming hot mug can help lift your spirits and mood and calm your emotions? That doesn't even mention the medicinal properties of the herbs inside. So it really can be a very powerful ritual, as well as medicinal properties of actually drinking the tea. I'm going to talk about 3 herbs today that can be very calming and supportive for the nervous system during this time. But before we jump into them, I just want to say, I'm not suggesting that you go out and start trying all 3 of these herbs. That can feel pretty overwhelming. If you just pick one, just picking one herb that you can really start bringing into your life can be incredibly powerful. So as I go through these next 3 herbs, just listen to them, think about how they sound, what you're most drawn towards, and start with one. And I do have, as I mentioned, recipes in the recipe guide for how you can incorporate these into some teas and other herbal drinks. Okay, so let's jump into chamomile. Chamomile is synonymous to me, with calming. It is a often overlooked herb, I think because it's so common, but I would encourage you to not underestimate this very powerful medicinal herb. I have a photo of some fresh chamomile dried leaves or flowers on the left. This is very different maybe than what you're used to in a little tea bag where you might have some dusty powder. When you get some really freshly dried, high quality chamomile flowers, the flavor can be very unique and complex and a little bit probably different than what you're used to. But chamomile has been shown to help soothe the nervous system and help with anxiety and agitation. And there's actually some good studies to support this. One study found that chamomile was more effective than a placebo in relieving depression and anxiety in adults. And another clinical study found that chamomile relieved mild to moderate anxiety in people diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. Those are just a few studies that I picked out. There are more. So I find chamomile can be somewhat instantly calming to the nervous system. It also can help promote sleep. So it's a great herb to consider taking in the evening, but it's not overly sedating. So if you're feeling stressed in the afternoon, most people can take a cup of chamomile tea and just feel calm and supported, but not feel like they have to take a nap. That can vary depending on your sensitivity and the person, but most often this is not an overly sedating herb. Another reason I really like chamomile and wanted to talk about in this particular presentation is that it can really improve digestion and can help with gas, pain, and bloating. And I remember that was particularly uncomfortable for me after my IVF cycles, is that feeling of bloating and cramping and swelling in the abdomen after my cycles. And I think chamomile would be a really beautiful herbal ally to help support that time. Okay. Next is lemon balm. And for me, when I think about lemon balm, I immediately think of uplifting. This is a mood lifting and brightening and joyful herb. It's also been shown to help promote calm and focus. So it helps you be able to maybe have a little bit more focus and attention on what you're doing while uplifting your mood. It has been shown to improve mental performance and decrease anxiety in as little as 1 dose in 1 hour. So this can be a fast-acting herb. Here's a couple of studies. There was a double-blind placebo-controlled study showing that it significantly increased self-ratings of calmness. And another study showed that in stressed volunteers over 15 days, it significantly reduced anxiety, improved anxiety-associated symptoms, and lowered insomnia. So again, this is an herb that can help with sleep, but won't be overly sedating. If anything, it's calming and focusing, but you can certainly take this throughout the day without feeling like you're going to fall asleep. But I do like using lemon balm in the evening to help sort of unwind from the day, to help calm some of the anxiety and that mental swirling where you're kind of ruminating on the day and your mind is going. I feel like lemon balm can help ground us and calm a lot of those emotions. I also find lemon balm helpful for people who, when they are stressed, they might find that their response to stress is feeling angry. Again, it's that uplifting and mood boosting, I think, benefits of lemon balm that can help move us from anger into a little bit more of an uplifted, positive mood. I also like using it for people who are finding that they're light sleepers, maybe because of stress that's going on in their life right now. So lemon balm is really a beautiful herb. It has a lemony taste, so it's very pleasant in teas. And I have a couple of recipes that you can experiment with, but taking lemon balm as just a straight, lemon balm tea bag is also a great option. Okay, the third strategy that I want to talk about is actually not an herb, it's a mushroom. But as herbalists, we work with mushrooms all the time. And this mushroom is called reishi. Reishi is also a calming adaptogen. If you're not familiar with the term adaptogen is used to describe a class of herbs and mushrooms that help us adapt and manage our response to stress better. I mentioned earlier that when we become stressed, there's a whole hormonal cascade that happens. One of the primary things is that our cortisol and adrenaline increase. And adaptogens have been shown to help decrease that spike in hormones and help us return to baseline a little bit faster. So simply said, adaptogens help us adapt and manage our response to stress. I find reishi has a very subtle and calming effect on the nervous system and tends to work better over longer term use. It has been shown to help reduce anxiety, stress, and insomnia over time. It's also a wonderfully supportive for the immune system, and that might be where you've heard of reishi mushrooms before. It's really well studied in this area. One of the reasons I want to talk about it today is because I find that reishi can be really easily incorporated in your daily routine in things you might already be taking. So for example, reishi mushroom blends really well with coffee. It also blends beautifully with like hot cocoa. So often when I'm working with a client who's feeling a little bit overwhelmed by adding in a whole regimen of supplements or herbs, reishi mushroom is a way that we might be able to take something they're already having, like their morning coffee, and just add it to it. You can even find online now or in stores, a lot of coffee brands are blending reishi in it. So you can buy a coffee reishi mushroom blend already. So it's an easy way to incorporate it into your life. Okay, so again, nervous system support. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed by the 3 herbs that we talked about or feel like, how do I pick the perfect one? They're all wonderful and they're all wonderfully supportive. And there's a lot of ways you can incorporate them into your daily life, from loose leaf teas and some of the tea recipes that you can get from the download on the website. But even something as simple as a hot chocolate cocoa mix that already has reishi mushroom mixed in, or a coffee where your reishi is mixed in, or a simple lemon balm tea bag from a high quality organic tea blend is perfect. Okay, So we talked about liver support, we talked about nervous system support. Now let's spend a few minutes talking about how do you put a plan in place without feeling like you're planning for failure. I want to again encourage you to not get overwhelmed by the material that's been presented and just pick one thing from each category. You will find that these simple changes can have a very big impact. So, for example, in the liver support section, we talked about nutrition and herbs. Pick one nutritional thing you can do, and maybe that's just making sure you're getting a little extra protein, or it's just continuing with your prenatal multivitamin. That is effective. For the liver support, just trying the golden milk turmeric tea could be really supportive for your liver. During the elimination section, we talked about some lifestyle support. Don't underestimate the kind of efficacy of making sure you're hydrated, getting a good amount of fiber, and a little bit of movement. So pick one that works for you. And if you still are needing some help, there is the lemon, ginger, honey tea that can help you get moving a little bit more. Nervous system, same thing. We talked about some lifestyle supports. Think about one thing that you're more drawn to and have that in your toolkit and ready to go. And for herbal support, start experimenting, play around, just pick one tea that you want to try. And I think you'll be surprised by how these little changes can have a really big impact. But I want you to feel ready to incorporate this if needed. So download the recipe guide, have these slides on hand. It will really help the time period when you need them go a lot more smoothly if you've thought about what you're going to incorporate and you have the teas on hand. And know that many of these herbs and recipes are safe and beneficial for multiple stages of your family building journey and life in general. But I would encourage you to work with a qualified practitioner or herbalist to help decide during different stages and phases of your family building journey so that you know exactly what is safe to take and when. So for example, different scenarios like pregnancy or taking certain medications, just work with somebody so that you know in different stages what is safe for you. And then I also want to really encourage you to plan for time and space to nurture and nourish. I remember how it felt to go from an unsuccessful IVF cycle and wanting to push and manage and say, I need to jump into this next cycle immediately. I don't want any downtime. I need to manage my appointments. I want to make sure that we stay on track. And that's going to be different for everybody. Everyone has a different response and thing they want to manage. And it's okay and healthy to have a plan in place and make sure you're able to execute and feel some agency to execute that plan. But what I'm encouraging you to think about is planning for a little bit of space to think about and pause and reflect on what your body needs after this time. Going through the IVF cycle is a lot. It's a lot physically, it's a lot emotionally. So give yourself a little bit of grace and know that you're going to need some time and space to just really nurture and nourish yourself. Oops. Sorry. So let's take a minute to summarize here. There are a lot of things we talked about to naturally support your body after an unsuccessful IVF cycle. And I hope that you're leaving this talk today feeling supported but not overwhelmed, because as I mentioned, simple changes will have a huge impact. You do not and should not do everything. So I want to focus on the support that you can give your liver with nutrient-dense foods and herbs, adequate protein, extra herbs to support the liver if necessary, and constipation support. For your nervous system, really prioritizing your sleep, space to listen to your body, and then some herbal teas to support the nervous system as needed. Having your plan in place. So again, download the recipes. I'll put the link up again on the next slide. Make sure you have purchased some of the herbs that you're going to work with during this phase. And you have a plan in place to work with a qualified practitioner to use them throughout your fertility journey if that's something you want to explore further. And again, make sure you have all the resources. Thanks, and I really hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.